gaming media outlet IGN recently reviewed Dragon Ball Sparking Zero and gave the game a 7. And this is an outrage. Did they not play the game? They gave it the same score as Concord. Do they not realize that this is everything us Dragon Ball fans have been wanting out of a video game for years now? Like, these criticisms are completely unfounded, talking about how the game's menus aren't very intuitive, and how the tutorials could have been a little more in-depth, and that the story mode is kinda frustrating at times. And wait a second, I think I agree with this review. Why are we getting angry about this again? A large chunk of gamers getting mad at mainstream gaming journalism is more or less a daily occurrence on the internet nowadays, and this situation with Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is just another Sunday at this point, but I have to ask myself, why do we as a society care about how IGN reviews the latest Dragon Ball game? Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is a fantastic game. I've spent the past week playing it, as every self-respecting nerd has, but to pretend that 7 out of 10 is an unfair score is... well, it's pretending. The game is chocked full of Dragon Ball fan service, outstanding fight animation, moment-to-moment combat that's simple enough for you to jump in but has just enough depth for a competitive scene to really get mileage out of it, and almost every character you could possibly want. But I do also agree with the perspective of IGN reviewer Jarrett. The tutorials aren't great, the menus aren't the best to navigate, especially with my stick-drifting DualSense, and story mode being separated to each character makes the overall experience a lot more choppy than I would like. And while a lifelong fan of the Dragon Ball series like myself can easily overlook these issues, for someone who isn't as big into the series, I could see why they would come away feeling kinda mixed about the whole thing. Looking at the past editorial work and personal social media profiles of Jarrett, he doesn't seem to be a particularly outspoken Dragon Ball fan, at least not in the same way a lot of the people harping on him for this review are. In his review, he makes a lot of references to the fact that all of this is stuff that he experienced as a child, implying that he's not amazingly up to date with the series. And a large factor of Sparking Zero's appeal is bringing that new content to an older game format. And if he was a bigger Dragon Ball fan, he probably wouldn't be reviewing the game, because IGN's editorial policy specifically states that if you have a significant personal connection to a product, you're not allowed to review it. And you might think, why would IGN put someone who isn't a diehard Dragon Ball fan in charge of the review for this game that's basically exclusively for diehard Dragon Ball fans? And to an extent, I would agree. For a game like Sparking Zero, this was probably destined to be a losing battle. But I think the perspective of someone who liked Dragon Ball growing up but kinda tuned out over time isn't an unnecessary one. Especially when you consider that Sparking Zero is a sequel to a game that came out 17 years ago. This review is one for the layman in the audience, written by someone who, from everything I can tell, is a bit of a layman on this particular topic himself. And most IGN articles nowadays seem to fit that bill. IGN isn't for you as much as it is for the average Joes of the gaming scene. But that begs the question, why is a traditional large gaming media outlet that advertises itself as a home for gamers not really the best place for us more hardcore players? And the truth is, the modern review format that so many of these large publications abide by is old. It's a fossil. Problem being, people love preserving fossils. The format that these reviews tend to have on offer got its start in stuff like magazines and television that had to appeal to as wide a net as possible. But as the internet evolved, more niches and specialists breaking out onto the scene, each with their own things to say, the lack of voice found in reviews from bigger media outlets is very easy to notice. Gaming is quite possibly the hardest form of entertainment to review objectively. The interactive nature of the medium makes it much easier for people to derive enjoyment in different places from their peers. There are 2 out of 10 games that I love with all my heart, and there are 10 out of 10s that I have found myself struggling to get through. For example, I hate Dark Souls. The slow combat in combination with what feels like masturbatory levels of difficulty and that satisfaction that supposedly comes from downing a boss has never quite clicked in my brain the same way it has for a lot of you. And I don't say that for attention. I feel like I put my channel's reputation at stake every time I talk about this. I say it because it applies to all of us. We all have our demons, our mainstream hits that we just can't seem to find our joy in, and our beloved failures. After all, all, if no one liked games that were quote-unquote objectively bad, we wouldn't have Overwatch fans. Yet you would never find a take that incendiary on a page like IGN's. They write everything to be dry and personalityless, lest they step out of line and cause the gaming community to joke about how game journalists don't actually know how to play games again. You can tell because basically every review for a AAA release to come from a larger gaming publication is a 7 or higher, because 7 is the lowest you can score something without it being seen as instantly negative. And even then, sometimes that doesn't work. Media outlets like IGN are primarily news outlets, and in order to give their reviews, which is an inherently opinionated medium, some sense of objective credibility, they all end up sounding kinda the same to appeal to a crowd that wants nothing to do with them in the first place. Gamers don't like it when people disagree with them. When someone likes a game that's a commercial failure, you'll find countless comments on stuff being like, oh, it's so underrated. Oh, I don't get why it has so many haters. And vice versa, when someone goes out and says they don't like X popular thing, you'll find tons of comments talking about how they just don't get it. Narratives about a game can change overnight because some really popular creators started talking about it and redefined how a lot of their audience thinks. There's a lot of groupthink that happens on the internet. And listen, I'm not saying that you need to be a striking individual at all times. I'm not even saying it's a bad thing. It's just a thing. It happens. But people are allowed to hate things you like. Which is why I find the fact that there's like a monthly discourse about how somebody reviewed a game wrong kinda silly. Reviews are in no uncertain terms opinion pieces, and trying to argue whether or not someone's opinion is right is mostly pointless. The IGNs of the world have their problems, I hope I've made that much clear, but I find it hard to muster up the energy to be mad at someone not having a positive experience with something I liked when I could just go have that positive experience myself and not worry about it. Gaming critics like this have their place, and that place is all lined up next to each other on a big Reddit post aggregating the reviews for an upcoming game so you can get a feel for what the people think. And if you think otherwise, when was the last time you read an IGN review? Because I can tell you for me, outside of work, it's been a while. I have a soft spot for the reviewers at these places. Growing up, I would watch a lot of IGN, so much so that it was a dream of mine to work there. I even applied a few times, which by the way, IGN? But in an era with more and more people being able to broadcast themselves without the need of a larger publisher, there's less need for this traditional style of review. You can go to IGN and read all about the stunning weaknesses of a game using a thesaurus's worth of adjectives, or you can come over here to YouTube and listen to someone yell at you about how something sucks shit for 4 hours straight. The only difference between me and someone at IGN is a 5-figure salary and the fact that I can say fuck whenever I want. There's this weird cynicism that implies that just because someone works at IGN, they somehow have elevated opinions and thus need to be on the right side of history every time, or the entire industry is seen as pointless. Yet when people disagree with me, they don't say YouTube as a whole is dumb, they just call me fat. Don't hate the reviewers because they reviewed wrong. Hate the people and culture who put them in this place where they have to be objectively right all the time, or else gaming has fallen. At the end of the day, these journalists are just gamers like us, and they are just as much a slave in the machine, so maybe they deserve a little grace. All this to say, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is pretty good. See ya!